When I finished reading The Wheel of Time, I thought, I wonder if there's another series out there that's similar, and that led me to Malazan. I mean, it's a big fantasy series, there's 10 books, it's high fantasy, that should make it similar, right? Wrong. Malazan is completely different.
And now for something completely different.
So Wheel of Time has now sold 100 million copies. By comparison, Malazan has sold 3 million. Now, 3 million is still good, it's more books than I've sold. But because of this difference in popularity, it means most people are going to Malazan after reading Wheel of Time or something similar. And that means they're taking with them certain expectations. And when those expectations aren't met, they get disappointed. So I want to tell you what you can expect from Malazan, because there is nothing quite like Malazan. It's truly a unique enigma in the fantasy world and occupies this weird space in the Fantasy Hall of Fame. It's not a safe, easy, or familiar story. It's kind of weird. It's pretty experimental, and it pushes the boundaries of the fantasy genre. And here's a bit of a hard truth to accept. Malazan is not right for everyone.
Blasphemer!
But I want to make it as easy as possible for you to try out Malazan. This video is all about making Malazan accessible, removing the intimidation factor from such a big series, so that you're not too scared to get started. Because if Malazan is the right book series for you, you will never love anything quite as much. I'd like to give a special shout out to my wife Kit in the props department for putting together this little display of the books. I did them all digitally and I didn't own them, but I wanted to point to them, so here's some paper. Yeah, we real fancy around here.
That is the least fancy thing I have ever heard.
One thing before we get started, I'm doing 2 videos on Malazan. Today's video is the beginner's guide, so it's all about how to get started. The second video is going to be all about the more confusing aspects of Malazan. It's all about how to keep reading. You can watch them both in any order, but just so you know, I am saving things like reading tips and reading orders for the second video. And I'll be talking about how this series actually has 2 authors and what that means for the story. But today, I just want to focus on the big question, is Malazan right for you? So welcome on board, I'm the book guy, and today I'm going to take you on a tour through the Malazan Empire. So the Malazan Empire comes from this tiny, tiny little island in the middle of a big ocean. It used to be rather unimportant. Then the Emperor Keleved took over. And this guy was like the real-world Alexander the Great, where he had military genius and massive armies, and he rapidly expanded the borders of Malazan into all the surrounding regions. He conquered entire continents, largely thanks to some of his best troops, the Bridge Burners. Now, the Bridge Burners are the explosives unit.
Kaboom!
Major battles were won entirely because of the Bridge Burners' incredible abilities to single-handedly break enemy armies. They are led by the tough bastard Whiskey Jack, who is advised by the sneaky mage Quickban. Every member of the Bridge Burners unit is a glorified hero and a celebrity of the Empire. But all of that has changed. The Emperor Keleved has just disappeared, presumed dead, and one of his top assassins has now taken over the job and proclaimed herself the Empress Lacine. So the Emperor disappeared and now his top assassin has the job? Yeah, we all know she did it, especially when her first act as Empress is to outlaw all the Bridge Burners.
Every single
Bridge Burner,
including your friend,
Whiskey Jack,
is now an enemy of the
Empire. Now the Bridge Burners find themselves stuck in the middle of the latest Malazan conquest, caught between the enemy side and betrayed by their own side. Whiskey Jack and co. must decide which side do they take now in this greater conflict. And doesn't that sound awesome? That is a good plot for a book. But here's the catch. All of that is just one plot line out of many. Let's break it down a bit further. Okay, so all that stuff with the Bridge Burners, let's call that plot A. Okay, so plot B, young Genos Paran is heir to a noble house, but he dreams of joining those legendary Bridge Burners once he's old enough. Of course, when he finally is old enough, the Bridge Burners are now the bad guys, so he joins a different faction. The Empress Lacine has sent her servant, the adjunct Lorne, into the enemy territory on a secret mission. You see, Lucine doesn't think she needs the bridge burners anymore, not when there is a greater, darker magic waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to summon it. So Lorne and young Genos Perrin team up to delve into, let's just say, a whole bunch of weird magical stuff. And I really do mean weird. Then plot C, the gods themselves have a stake in this conflict. The whole pantheon of gods is watching this. Many are pulling strings to influence what's going on. One god has even gone so far as to take human form as a child so that it can take direct action. And no, it's not Jesus. It's Cotillion. Cotillion's very different. Plot D, Animander Rake is a Tista Andi, and let's not overcomplicate it. They're elves, okay? The Tista Andi are just elves, just deal with it. They are sick of the Malazan Empire and those petty humans infringing on their continent. So Animander Rake has this dark sword called Dragnapur, which is actually a gateway into another dimension. I don't know why, it just is, okay? Rake is getting involved as well. He also has a flying castle called Moonspawn, because flying castles are cool. And that's where the title Gardens of the Moon comes from, the Moonspawn Castle. Plot E. All of this is converging on the city of Darujistan. The city was next in line to be conquered until the Malazan Empire changed rulers. Now, a bunch of the locals are trying to get the bridge burners on their side, or Animander Rake, or one of the gods, or basically anyone they can to protect their homeland, because this is where the hammer of the conflict is going to fall. Wow, I haven't even mentioned Tata Sale and her plot line. Is that plot F? Guys, I've got bad news. All of these plots I've just mentioned, that's all in only book 1. Maybe now's a good time to address the first elephant in this room. There's no way to avoid this. Malazan is complicated. There are a lot of plot lines in a really big world, and it can be very, very hard to keep track of it all. Now, many people who read Malazan say that they take notes while reading. Others say that they read each book twice before they move on to the next one. I personally had to read a lot of online summaries and discussion boards so I could comprehend everything that was going on, just so I could keep up. Yeah, this sounds like a lot of work. So this is one of the hardest challenges of going through Malazan. The sheer amount of effort required from the reader to engage with this story. Now, the series is famous for this aspect. While other authors and books will kind of hold the reader's hand a little too much, Malazan goes to the other extreme and kind of throws the reader into the deep end and says, sink or swim, bitch. And some of you might think, why would anyone do this to themselves? And yeah, that was a question I asked myself a lot while I was going through the series. And here's my answer. Reading Malazan is like going on a treasure hunt. It's a lot of searching and a lot of digging, but when you get that treasure, it is pure gold at the end. The finished product, once you comprehend it, is always brilliant and masterfully done. But it's also more than just a good finished product. After a while, the treasure hunt itself becomes the joy. It's like doing a massive jigsaw puzzle. There's no real reward for it, no one's making you do it. The very act of searching and piecing together becomes its own reward. And that's what Malazan is like, as you get these little pieces and start seeing where they all fit. So this is why Malazan is not for everyone, because a lot of people read so that they can just relax and shut off their brain. Not everyone wants to read a book so that it will stretch their mind to its fullest capacity to try to take in all this information. This is also where Malazan fans can get a bit intense. They promise, oh, if you just do all the work, it's really worth it. Ultimately, this is your choice to read this series. Do you want to do the work to comprehend something this big? It was worth it for me to do it. It may not be for you. Now, if you want tips for reading Malazan and how to tackle all that complexity, do stay around for my second video, because that's where we're going to talk about those tips. But for today, let's continue with the introduction. So we've got a second elephant in the room. So here's a fun fact. Stephen Erickson had secured a publisher for book 1, Gardens of the Moon. So he finally started book 2. He was 300 pages into it when his computer died and he lost it all.
This is what I have so far. Pain. That's it.
He was so upset he just couldn't go back and try to write it again from the start. So he started a completely different story in a completely different part of Malazan. And that's where we got Book 2, Dead House Gates. This is also the reason why the series has such an unusual structure. And I wish someone had explained this unusual structure to me, but when I read it. So I'm going to do it for you. And to help me out, I'm going to need a special guest. No, it's not Steven Erickson, but wouldn't that be cool? It's our old friend, Green Screen! Yay! G'day kids and welcome to class. I'm Mr. Kronk and today we're going to be doing a session on the map of the Malazan world. I hope you're as excited about this as I am. And by the end of this class, kids, I'm sure we'll all be friends.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
So quick note, there is no official map for the world of Malazan. The map is simply too complicated to make, but Erickson has said the fan maps are getting pretty close. So for today's purpose, this fan map is going to do just fine. As you can see, this world is as big as Earth. So we've got 6 continents spread out and several other land masses. So it's a big place.
He's not even using a laser pointer.
And now you're probably thinking, okay, so where's the Malazan Empire? Well, right here in the middle, we've got this island of this big continent of Quantali. And Malazan is a tiny, tiny, tiny little island off the southern coast of it. And that's where the Malazan Empire came from. And you might think, okay, so that's where the story takes place, right? Wrong! The series focuses a lot more on the outer territories where the expansion of the Malazan Empire took place. So the empire swallowed up Quantali and then expanded. It's got outposts along the southern region, but we don't spend a lot of time there. The big pushes were into the continent over here, Genabacus, and the big continent up here in the north, the 7 cities. So book 1 takes place over here, in the continent of Genabacus. So you know what, let's just get that up there. So all those plot lines I mentioned earlier with the bridge burners and Enamanda Rake, that all takes place in Genabacus. It is very self-contained, because that is a big ocean surrounding it. Think like the Pacific Ocean, okay? So book 2 goes over here, into the north, into the continent of 7 cities. Let's get book 2 up there. This is so much fun. And this was because Steven Erickson's computer died, right? So he changed the location of the second book. So we started a completely new story. So while the plot of Genabacus is all about an ongoing conquest, 7 cities was already conquered. So the plot here is actually about an uprising. It's a revolution known as the Whirlwind, where all the locals are sick of Malazan's crap and they decided to kick him out. So books 1 and 2 are completely separate. Okay, so there is a huge distance between them. Think like Europe and North America. Okay, it's a big gap. So there's a totally different cast of characters, completely different places, new settings, and completely different plot lines. This is why it is extra difficult to get into the Malazan series, because there is this learning process you've got to go through twice. But books 1 and 2 do have some things in common. They are both linked to the Malazan Empire in the middle, and they both have some of the bridge burners units in them, and they have the same gods and magic system. Also, remember young Ganos Parin? So his younger sister, Felicen, is a major character in book 2, so that's another link. But that's kind of it. Now, good news. Book 3 returns to Genabacus. All right, let's get that up there. Bing. So it's all the same characters and settings from book 1. This is where it starts to feel a bit simpler to comprehend. That's why a lot of fans say that they didn't like the series until book 3, because book 3 is the first book that goes back to a previous setting and you start getting a bit more familiar with it. Except book 3 has completely different plot lines, right? It's not a continuation of the story. So in book 3, there is another empire to the northern regions of Genabacus who are coming down south. They are a bunch of religious fanatics who use religion to motivate extreme acts of violence, and they're sick of the Malazan heathens. So this is another major aspect of the Malazan books. Every book is episodic. So even the books that are in the same location still have new plot lines. So again, it is not like Wheel of Time telling one big grand story. Each book is episodic and self-contained. So book 4 goes back to 7 cities. Hey. So same thing again. So same characters as book 2, same settings, but once again, different plot lines. Okay, so you're all kind of with me at this stage, right? Everyone feels like they're getting the hang of Malazan, right? Wrong! Book 5 is in another new location, all the way down here on the opposite side of the world, in the Lethery Empire. So this setting is a completely different part of the world, never heard of Malazan, and the book has the same gods and magic system, but that's it. So it is the biggest learning curve since book 1. This book is all about the local Tista Andi, the elves, who are sick of the greedy humans of the Lethery Empire crapping all over the indigenous populations. So this is a great book, one of my favorites in the series, but it is yet another learning experience, and that can be a bit frustrating for readers. Okay, so that's it for the first 5 books, and let's just take a little break to pause here because some people consider the first 5 books to be Series 1. Because in Series 1, each book is contained to the location it's in, okay? There is very little crossover. But in the second half of Malazan, so Series 2, if you will, there starts being crossover between different series where characters in different locations start meeting each other. There's nothing official like that Series 1 and Series 2, but it just helps with the comprehension. Now let's just rapid fire these second series, if you will. So Book 6 gets interesting. So characters from 7 cities and in Genebacus start converging on Malaz Island. And fun fact, this is the only Book of the Fallen book that actually goes to the Malazan Empire. Go figure. Anyway, Book 6 does spend the majority of its time in the 7 cities area, but there is crossover. Now, Book 7 does go back to the Lethri Empire again, but with crossover. And then Book 8 goes back to Genebacus, but with crossover. Finally, Books 9 and 10, they need to be read as a duology. Okay, so every other book in the series is episodic. Books 9 and 10 need to be read together because it tells one big story. And I would argue that Books 9 and 10 take place mostly in the Lethri Empire. Boom. But they have a much more global focus than the other books in the series. Based there, but they do have far-reaching consequences and interact with a lot of the other plot lines. So there we have it. So that is how I like to divide the books by location. And I really hope that that has made things a lot simpler for you to comprehend. It massively helped me to comprehend the series once I understood the locations, and I hope that really helps you to get a bit more of a feel for how it's going to work, okay? Thank you, green screen. You're welcome. Okay, so Malazan is episodic, and each book is self-contained, but there are a couple of big plots that sort of stretch between books and over the whole series. Again, it's not like Wheel of Time. There is no Dragon Reborn building up to fight the Dark One in Tarmon Gaiden, but these big plots will help you to track the overall progress of the series. So big plot number 1 is the state of the Malazan Empire. So anything to do with the ruling of the empire has far-reaching consequences. So the conquests in the east, the rebellions in the north, and the political manipulations for the throne. All of this stuff affects the empire itself throughout the series, which in turn affects the plots of future books. So pay attention to the state of the empire. Big plot number 2 is the bridge burners. So anytime a bridge burner shows up, pay attention. This is main plot time, okay? And it's not just their leaders, Whiskey Jack and Quick Ben. There's a huge number of bridge burners spread all over the world. And they're always a major focus for the novel that they're in. Big plot 3 is the Perrin family. Middle child and brother Ganos Perrin, younger sister Felicen, and elder sister Tavore. At least one of these big 3 will be a major character for the whole book. In all but 2 of the books, there's a Perrin who plays a major role. In fact, Ganos Perrin has the unique distinction of having more point of view segments than any other character in Malazan. Ganos is almost the main character. But he's not like Randall 4 because Ganos is only in 5 out of the 10 books, okay? So it's still much smaller involvement. But pay attention to the Perrins because they are always relevant. Although, side note, the elder sister Tavore, she is a morally ambiguous character. So curiously, we almost never get a point of view segment from her perspective, so that we never quite know what she's thinking and what she's up to. It's a very effective way to keep her morally ambiguous, but she is still the focus whenever there's a point of view nearby her. Big plot number 4, the Crippled God. Okay, so this is the last and biggest plot line in the whole series. So the Crippled God is a powerful, wretched creature that was cast down and chained by the other gods. We don't know why. The Crippled God is desperate to escape by any means necessary. That's why Book 10 is actually called The Crippled God, because the series has actually been building up to this point. So it's the most significant plotline of the series because it plays a major role in the climax of the main sequence. It is hard to keep track of all the things in Malazan, but here's a big reason why people read it anyway, because every scene is great on its own. So anytime I was reading Malazan, I was always thoroughly enjoying the scene I was in the present. I may not understand the context of where that scene fit into the greater plot lines, and I may not even understand who some of the characters in the scenes were, but it was always entertaining and interesting. I was recently talking with YouTuber Alan from the Library of Alexandria, and he made the point that Malazan is almost a collection of short stories. And it's a compelling argument I haven't considered before, because each scene is like its own little short story, and it's a pretty legitimate way to look at it. There's also some amazing prose all the way through this series. It's one of Erikson's greatest strengths. Each line of text and dialogue just sings. The character dialogue in particular is really well defined on so many levels. The characters always speak like real people. And each character has their own unique voice. That's actually one of the hardest techniques to master as a writer, making each character have their own way of wording and speaking. And Erikson had absolutely mastered that technique. There's also brilliant humor. I cannot stress this enough. In the midst of the millions of plot lines and all that complexity, I always wanted to keep reading because it was always fun. Certain characters and character duos in particular were the comedic relief all through the series, and very well done. I think Gessler and Stormy were two of my favorites. One was a captain, one was a soldier, and they have this fascinating chemistry between them. Then there's the powerful Lord Tehol and his manservant and butler, Bug. Every exchange between them was so dry and clever, reminded me of Blackadder in many ways.
A major crisis has arisen in your affairs.
Yes, I know, Blackadder. I've been pondering it all morning.
You have, sir?
Yes, socks! Run out again!
There's a lot of these great exchanges of conversations that just made me laugh out loud all through the series. So this is a major reason to read Malazan. So even though the big picture is easy to get lost in, these small-scale scenes help you get lost in a different way. Get it? Never mind. Okay, look, there's very slight spoilers in this section, but it'll be very vague and non-specific. Another major draw card for the series is lots of characters die. I don't know if that's appealing exactly, but what I mean is like there are strong emotional moments, right? So yay. In all the grand scale big events, this is still a story about people. We care intensely about these characters. In fact, I always felt like the characters were anchors, keeping me grounded in the vast ocean of story. If things were hard to keep track of, I just focused on the characters and it brought me back on track. But also, a lot of characters die in this series. And I'm not talking about Boromir from Lord of the Rings. Like, yes, his death is sad, but he's also a secondary character, not a main character. And he's certainly not a point of view character. The character deaths in Malazan would be more like if Frodo, Sam, or Aragorn were to die. Or if it were Harry Potter, it would be one of the big three. And this is the thing too. It's in literally every book. A major protagonist dies in every book. This makes Malazan very similar to Game of Thrones or The First Law, because if main characters can die, every action scene becomes much more tense. Also, none of the character deaths are wasted. There is emotional weight to each and every one of them, because Erikson does a brilliant job of setting it up and making us care so much before he delivers that emotional gut punch. The sick bastard. There is so much heroism and tragedy in this story. Malazan is filled with the beauty of profound human experiences. Now let's talk about two major themes of Malazan. So Malazan is packed full of big themes. You might even say themes are a major theme of Malazan, but for time, I'm just going to look at probably the biggest two, or maybe just my two favorite. So every book has a major military action at its core. There's a big focus on armies, commanders, military strategy, and all those mundane administrative tasks that go into running an army. In fact, I'd say about half the characters in the series have a military background. Yet the story isn't pro-military, right? There's no sign-up sheet at the back to get you into the army. Instead, Erikson offers a profound deep dive into the daily grind of military life. What drives people to become soldiers? What does a soldier do when the empire suddenly turns on them and makes them the bad guy? How does a commander make decisions that could spell life or death for thousands of people? How does a commander make moral decisions when they're being pressured by the empire and king and country to make harsh decisions? And that leads all into the morality question. You see, Malazan is not a grimdark series, but there are elements of grimdark seen in the blurred morality. It massively focuses on the bridge burners, who are caught between multiple sides of the conflict. We immediately see from the perspective how the whole concept of sides in warfare is completely meaningless to people caught in the middle. Again, it's not Wheel of Time where you are fighting literal Satan and armies of bestial Trollocs. These are humans against humans, and there's rarely a clear sense of good versus evil, just side versus side. Sometimes the Malazan Empire are the good guys, sometimes they're the bad guys. But more often than not, they're just the Malazan Empire, one of the sides. So this perspective carries through the entire series. There's always an emphasis in every battle that there are characters on each side of the conflict, and they always have a compelling reason why they are fighting. This avoids the major trap of high fantasy of painting a simplistic worldview of black and white and good versus evil. This is nuanced and has wisdom in how Erikson perceives the world and how he portrays it to us. So Malazan has a lot of social commentary if you want to pay attention to it. I think it's 100% possible to do a read-through of Malazan and just not pay any attention to the more political aspects of it. But Erikson is upfront with a lot of his beliefs. So Book 3 deals a lot with the dangers of religious extremism. Book 5 deals with the dangers of capitalism and a wealth-driven society where wealth is seen as a virtue and poverty as a personal failing. Books 2 and 5, a huge portion of the books deals with colonization and the mistreatment of indigenous populations. So there are a lot of real-world issues discussed in this fantasy setting. Malazan is also filled with a lot of leading ladies right from the start. The story is still pretty male-dominated, like it's never a 50-50 male-female, but there's always a major plotline that revolves around leading ladies, which I do appreciate. There are a lot of discussions about racial prejudice throughout the series. There are races like Malazan and the Lethari Empire that are seen as higher and culturally superior races compared to the primitive Seven Cities and the indigenous, for example. There are a lot of people of color in the series on both sides of the conflict. There are even blue people, although I'm not sure if that's better or worse representation. As for LGBT, it is fascinating. There are definitely several characters who are openly out, and it's never an issue for the characters on screen. There is zero homophobia in Malazan. Yet there is a massive number of characters who their sexuality is just never discussed. It's never a part of who they are. But we kind of know.
This is my last little man, I promise. Oh, Gil, who are you kidding?
No one, Gil.
I mean, Crupper, right? Crupper is such a queen. Like, surely. Like I said, it is possible to read through Malazan and not notice any of the real-world parallels. Erikson does a great job of easing that stuff onto the page without being heavy-handed or preachy. But if you're looking for it, you will find a lot to appreciate here. This is definitely an adult series. It's not grimdark or hyper-violent, but it has pretty confronting stuff and some heavy adult themes. So there are a lot of violence in the wars themselves, obviously. There are several war crimes and a lot of actions that would break the Geneva Convention. For example, there is a mass crucifixion scene, which was pretty shocking. So yeah, there's some pretty intense violence. There's also a fair amount of sexual assaults in the series, against both men and women. There's even one villain who is a known pedophile, who thinks a lot about what he likes to do. We don't see it on screen, but it is still quite confronting. Though, for what it's worth, this guy does die pretty spectacularly. I mean, spoiler, but he chokes to death on his own castration. Even if this is not done for entertainment or drama effect, it's still a pretty confronting topic. So there are 10 books in the main Malazan sequence, Book of the Fallen. But keep in mind, there is a second author for Malazan, that is Ian Esselmont. So Ian and Stephen created this world together, and they planned books together. So both authors are equally canon. Ian has written 6 books in his own main sequence, and they don't really overlap with Books of the Fallen, but they are sort of complementary. So Stephen's series is the Book of the Fallen, Ian's series is Novels of the Malazan Empire. So I'm going to talk more about the two author dynamic in the next video. Both Stephen and Ian have been writing more Malazan books outside of their two main sequences. So both of them are doing separate prequel series before the main sequence, and Stephen has just started writing a sequel series that takes place after the end of Book of the Fallen. There are also 2 collections of novellas, which means as of August 2023, there are 24 Malazan books. Wow. And just so you know, I have read both of the main sequences, but I haven't read any of the prequels or sequels just yet. I am hoping to do a video on Ian's series, the novels of the Malazan Empire one day, and then once I've read the rest, I'll do a video called Prequels, Sequels, Novellas, Oh My. But that is the structure of the series. The big question really is, how much should you try? So if you're unsure if you want to read all 24 Malazan books, don't worry, you don't have to. My advice is to just start with Book of the Fallen. If you read this main sequence and you're finding you're still interested and you're hungry for more Malazan, then let's go from there. But if you're unsure if you even want to read all of Book of the Fallen, since it's 10 big meaty books, well, this is kind of tricky. Most readers say it's around book 3, Memories of Ice, where they actually start to get really into it. And remember, that's because book 3 is the first book that returns to a previous setting. So it's around book 3 that most readers feel they finally start to grasp everything that's going on. Personally, I was convinced to read Malazan after book 2. I actually really enjoyed Dead House Gates. It really sold the concept on me, and I was really invested in the two main characters, historian Dika and the military leader Coltane. Those two just stole my heart. But whatever you pick, I have to warn you, book 1 is kind of rough, right? Gardens of the Moon is just simply hard to get into, and it turns off a lot of readers. If you want to try Malazan, try to read up to book 3, and that will properly show you what the hype is all about. And if you do successfully read book 3 and say, I'm never doing that to myself again, then yeah, you've had a fair sampling. Malazan may not be for you. But make sure you watch my next video for reading tips on how to get through Malazan and how to tackle all that complexity. Okay, we're done. That was the Beginner's Guide to Malazan, Book of the Fallen. And I hope you finally got a clear picture of what this whole series is about and whether or not it is for you. So stick around because I'm making 2 Malazan videos back to back. The second video is going to include reading tips, a deeper look into the writing techniques behind the massive series. And I'm extremely excited for it. I hope to see you there. Please like and subscribe. Please also comment below if you're going to do it respectfully. Remember, everyone has different reading tastes, so be nice, everyone. Looking at you, Malazan fans. You can support this channel by checking out our shop, Rainbow Space Unicorn. Also, I really hope you would all take the time to check out our Kickstarter that my beautiful and talented wife, Kit, has put together. This is a Kickstarter for a fairy tale range of bookish bags, and we would love to get it fully funded so we get every product up there, but that is up to you. I hope you'll check it out. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I really hope I see you next time, and I hope you make time for a good book today. Bye!